Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I now call the special meeting of the School Board of Palm Beach County to order at 2 p.m. on June 24th, 2020. Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. Here. District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield. Here. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews. Here. District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum with all 7 board members present. Also joining us on our virtual dais is Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, General Counsel Julianne Rico, Inspector General Lung Chu, and Board Clerk Carol Bass. Senior staff members will join us periodically as directed by the superintendent. Today, the board will only have this special meeting, and the meeting will be conducted using Google Meet technology for board members and staff who are participating live. Viewers and listeners can access this meeting by either watching on Comcast channel 235 or by using the YouTube link on our webpage at palmbeachschools.org. We also offer a listening only option, which the public can access by calling 561-357-5900 or toll free at 1-866-930-7015. The meeting ID is 1561-880-1124 hashtag. Now please direct your attention to the flag on the screen. Dr. Fenoy, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. This meeting is being transcribed by a closed captioner, so remember to speak at a reasonable pace. A quick review of our meeting protocol for those of the people that are in attendance. I know the board members all know this already. If you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. And as the board members know, if you raise your hands when you want to speak and get my attention, I'll nod to let you know that I've seen you. Raise your hand and I'll recognize you in the order that I see your hands go up. Again, if you need to step away from the meeting for a moment, please turn off your camera. This will let us know that you've stepped away, although we know you can still hear what's happening in the meeting. We have 2 items added for good cause. They are BRD1 and P2. I'll read the good cause statements. As to BRD1 Inspector General contract, good cause exists for adding this item to the agenda now. At the June 17, 2020 virtual special meeting for IG search, the board requested that an employment contract for the new Inspector General be brought for consideration at the June 24th, 2020 special meeting. Board action is needed to allow the new Inspector General to assume her duties as soon as possible. As to item P2, personnel addendum, good cause exists to add this item to allow for the new employees to begin as soon as possible. My computer is not cooperating. I can't get to the top of the agenda at the moment, so I think the next thing on the agenda is Stan, if you're listening, you need to come back here, please.
Items withdrawn.
Is there any items to withdraw, Mr. Superintendent?
No, sir. I have nothing to withdraw at this time.
Carol, what's the next item? We can't see the top of the agenda.
Items pulled by board members. So far, we have 1 item pulled, P1.
Any board member want to pull any other item? We need a motion to approve the agenda as modified. Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Ms. McQuinn. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Disclosures.
Are there any disclosures by the board members? I see no hands.
Comments.
Okay, Board, Mr. Superintendent, comments?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to remind parents, students, staff, and community members joining us right now that the district series of virtual town hall meetings continues this evening. The goal of these meetings is to update you on the district's reopening plans for the 2021-21 school year, and with that, to answer questions that were submitted in advance of those meetings. Each virtual meeting is specific to the needs of the district as a whole, while also taking into account the unique needs of students living in various geographical areas throughout the county. You'll find the full town hall meeting schedule and video links of meetings that already took place at palmbeachschools.org/townhallmeetings. I also like to thank the more than 66,000 parents and guardians who responded to our reopening of schools survey. Right now, a district data team is analyzing all of those results. As the process reaches its final stages, we are narrowing down viable reopening options by eliminating plans or suggestions that are just not feasible. Within days, parents and employees will have a much clearer picture of what back to school might look like. This information will, of course, help parents and staff better prepare and focus their efforts accordingly. This will be discussed at greater length during the school board's workshop on July 1st, which is next week. Sharing a quick preliminary overview, I can tell you that generally the respondents were fairly evenly split in their back to school preferences when asked about returning to school full-time, continuing distance learning full-time, or some form of a blended model which both options would be used. While survey responses hold a lot of weight in the decision-making process, it's important to remember that final decisions that the district will make will be based on a variety of factors, including financial, legal, health, and other requirements that we must meet in the best interest of all of our students, staff, and the community. I'd also like to thank the more than 15,000 members of our staff who responded to a survey specifically addressing their needs. The district will do everything. That survey actually closed last night at midnight. The district will do everything possible to safeguard the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff while continuing to engage all of our children in high-quality instruction. Ensuring these priorities amid a changing landscape means that we must build flexibility into our plans so that we are prepared to adjust based on changing circumstances and evolving needs. This is going to be what I refer to as the red light, green light year, meaning that we must be prepared to quickly change course when doing so is in the best interest of all of our students and staff. We will be prepared to accomplish exactly that. So at this time, I turn over the podium back over to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Board member comments, Ms. McQuinn? How about Mr. Shaw? Mrs. Brill? Mrs. Whitfield? Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, just a quick one. I was on the town hall last night with Mrs. Whitfield for the Hispanic, Haitian, Portuguese. It was absolutely a wonderful experience being able to participate and to hear the staff, the wonderful staff, the region superintendents and the staff of Palm Beach County School District guide the public and help them to understand what the issues are as it relates to opening the schools and to give them a voice. So it was wonderful. I'll be tuning into others, but the one that I did attend last night along with Ms. Whitfield, we had a good time. It was great.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson? We have no speakers on the consent agenda. We have one item pulled, I-1. The board members want to pull anything else? If not, we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified. Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll take us to Mrs. Andrews. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was P1, not I1. It was P1 that I pulled.
Okay. So we have
That's correct. I1 is left on the consent agenda.
okay. So the only thing left on the consent agenda was I1, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we had a motion to approve that consent agenda. So under new business, the first item is BRD1. to that one. I recommend the board approve the proposed Inspector General employment contract and authorize the board chair and superintendent to execute all necessary documents. Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Mrs. Brill. Under discussion, I would just like to first say a few words before board comments. I want to thank, especially thank Attorney Patricia Morales in the General Counsel's office. She worked with me Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to get all the changes that were needed in there. So I appreciate all the help she gave us, especially over the weekend when Friday, everybody else was off and Ms. Morales was working with us for hours on each one of those days. So I appreciate her help. I also want to point out to the board that we discovered there's a couple other things in the board policy. I know we've talked about changing the board policy to update it, but there's a couple things in the board policy that were kind of problematic. One thing in the board policy, it says that the Inspector General term should be no less than 4 years. I know we put that in place years ago when we first put Mr. Chu in there. So the General Counsel's office, Ms. Morales, has put a provision in there that where the new superintendent, the new Inspector General, excuse me, the new Inspector General recognizes that there's a 4-year term in the policy, but she's waiving that and accepting the 3-year term at this time. And then there's also a provision that says that the evaluation of the Inspector General must be 4 months, 4 months prior to the end of the fiscal year, which makes it way back in March 1st when we have to do the evaluation. At some point, we should change the policy on that so that it doesn't have to be so many months before the end of the fiscal year. And also then I'm sure the Inspector General would approve a contract change at that point to fix that provision. But based on the policy language, we went with that date, and that's why it's so early in the year, March 1st. Other than that, if board members have any questions, comments, Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you, Mr. Barbieri. I completely agree with you. Some of the issues that I have with the IG policy, it's just kind of, it just kind of goes around in circles a little bit. So I feel like, you know, some of those provisions don't need to be in there. And so I'd like to ask that Ms. Michael, when she comes on, that she makes revising this policy, you know, a high priority, because I would love to have her opinion as we go forward with developing a policy that's a little bit more current and fits with her. So, you know, I think let's see if we can work towards that. That would be wonderful, especially just to fix some of these little issues that we have with it.
I agree with you. We had a bunch of hands go up at the same time, so I'm going to call them in the order I think I saw them. Mrs. Brill, then Mrs. McQuinn, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And all that I wanted to say, when I interviewed both candidates, I did mention the need for us to revise our policy. So what I would like us to do, though, because we, you know, there are certain issues that concern me, certain issues that concern all of you, I'd like us to try and have a workshop on that policy as quickly as possible. So not only for Ms. Michael to make it a priority, but for us to have the board clerk schedule an opportunity for us to all discuss it together so that we can iron out all the kinks.
I'm sure I'll work with the superintendent to get that on our calendar as soon as we can. Mrs. McQuinn?
Yeah, reiterating the previous comments about the policy. I think we'd agreed to wait until we do have our new IG on board to start working on that. Secondly, thank you for all the time you put into making this happen. And of course, Ms. Michael for making it easy. I'm assuming she made it easy on you. Thank you.
Yeah, she was a pleasure to work with. She was. So it's going to be a great relationship, I think. Dr. Robinson?
So I think maybe Mrs. Brill's comments probably addressed my concerns. So what I was thinking as listening to my fellow board members is that this new IG won't have any true appreciation of what needs to be tweaked in the policy until she sits in that seat for a while. But if we have a workshop, because the board, I mean, it's our policy, right? And the policy is based on the institution, not the individual. So if we have a workshop, then we as a collective can work that out, even with her inexperience in the role. But I have some other questions on this item. And I don't mean to be mean or cynical or any of these negative words, but and I'm going to call it experience has led me to this. So I don't see in this policy, the way I read it, for the next 3 years, unless we can document cause, I don't see an option to separate from, and I see legal's hand coming up. So I just need to understand that.
Yeah, Mrs. Rico can answer that, but I saw the same thing, and there's an explanation why I assume you mean there's not a no cause termination in here. Yes.
Correct.
And in reviewing the policy, while we were drafting the agreement, the policy restricts the ability to have that type of clause in the contract.
I believe that was for independence, so that the board couldn't decide. We just didn't like him, like the inspector general, and for no reason at all, we just decided we wanted to fire them because they weren't, so that there's only a for-cause provision in there. That's the explanation that I understand from when we initially did that. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I don't know. That's something that I'm a little bit conflicted about because. And no disrespect intended, we haven't seen this IG at work. I mean, honestly. Previously, we had Mr. Chu as a long time as an auditor, right? I don't have any expectation to think that we will want to part ways, but it troubles me that by contract we get locked in. And so, and the independence argument, I mean, I do remember that. I would like to hear my fellow board members' thoughts on whether or not we should have a supermajority for no cause termination and then amend the policy, as opposed to saying, in this case, the policy locks us in.
All right, Mrs. Rico, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Just by way of guidance, you would have to have the new IG, the contracting employee, also waive that provision as we did the annual years, just to point that out.
I would love to agree with Dr. Robinson on this. I was also a little uncomfortable with it being such a long time without having the ability to end the relationship if we needed to. I think, we ask it of our superintendent, and I think there's a reason for that. And I would love to see the same provision. I think a supermajority kind of covers your bases, and I like that idea. But I would love to see that amended as well.
All right, just so the board, I got you, Mrs. Brill and Mrs. Andrews. Just so the board knows, I tried for a 2-year contract. Ms. Michaels said she had watched us and talked about, going outside, and felt that she didn't want to look like she was an interim inspector general while we decided whether we really wanted to have an inside. So she asked for a 3-year, which we all thought was reasonable for a person at that level. So that's why a 3-year. And that brought up the point where I looked at the contract and said, but there's not any way to terminate for no cause. And then I remembered, and we looked back, and that was the reason. But a supermajority is what we have, I believe, in the general counsel's contract and also in the superintendent's contract. I believe the next person was Mrs. Andrews, and then Ms. Brill, I think I saw her hand go.
And thank you. And this is not to demean anyone, but as you looked at her resume, this is the first time she will be serving in this kind of capacity. She has not worked within a school district before, working with a board, as well as having this kind of experience. It is a learning process and a tool that we're working through. And so I really do want to make sure that we don't do for her something different than we're doing for the general counsel as well as the superintendent. And there's going to be some support mechanisms that need to be in place for her. So this is very new experience for her as I looked at her background. Thank you.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So I don't feel comfortable having the no cause termination. And the reason why is because the Inspector General is very different in terms of the relationship with the board versus the superintendent and general counsel. You know, let's say there's an investigation on one of us and we don't particularly like the way it comes out or something. I just feel like, you know, that's a position where I feel very comfortable with her background, with her experience, with the people that she's been employed by before. So I would not support that change to the contract, but of course, you know, it's going to be majority rule on that. But I'm comfortable with the contract as written.
All right, I think I saw Ms. McQuinn, then Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
I'm also very comfortable with the contract as written. And furthermore, I want to lock down Ms. Michael with her contract tonight.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, if there's an investigation of any of us, the superintendent of any of us, we have outside. This is in our policy. So I don't worry about that because that's not anything that she will handle if there's an issue with any of us in these top level positions. Our policy indicates that we have an outside objective party that will work on those issues.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. Again, I'm not expecting a problem, but I just don't like being locked in for 3 years unless I can prove one of the 7 deadly sins or they lose their certification. So if we're done talking, then I'm going to offer, I don't know if it's an amendment, but to the motion to ask Mr. Barbieri to return to the negotiations table to add a termination without cause clause requiring a supermajority vote to the contract.
Okay, Dr. Robinson, just keep in mind, I think in the contracts where we have no cause, we also offer severance pay since we're terminating an employee for no cause. And I believe it's 3 months, and Mrs. Rico shaking her head. I believe that's typically what we have in these contracts where we terminate one of the upper administration or one of our contract employees. So, I mean, I don't know what you want to do with that with respect to your motion.
I'm not going to address that in my motion. My motion stands. I'm leaving it for you to negotiate. We can have subsequent conversation around that, but I don't need to include that in my motion. I just need to get this piece addressed. And so I'm looking for a second.
Seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Discussion? Ms. McQuinn?
Again, I just want to reiterate my position that we get her contract, that it not be renegotiated.
Ms. Brill?
And, you know, time is pressing, so I agree with Mrs. McQuinn. We really need to get this contract in place, and I am comfortable, again, reiterating it. Yes, I do know we have an outside method, but, you know, there's other things that sometimes, you know, people may not be comfortable with, and I believe that for the true independence of that office, I do not have any issue with there being a no cause termination not in the contract.
Mr. Shaw, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I agree with Mrs. Brill and Mrs. McQuinn, and I believe we need to move forward with this.
Mrs. Whitfield.
So I'm very much for Dr. Robinson's motion. The only concern I have is I believe she has to start on Wednesday next week. Is that true? And so we're asking her to start on the same day we would approve her contract?
Well, I suppose if the board is comfortable with, if this motion goes forward and the board is comfortable with me getting that in the contract without coming back to the board and just signing it after the general counsel looks at it, that we don't have to bring it back next week, or we could at least get it signed so it's done and then give you a report next week that it's been finished up. Julian, Rico, you want to weigh in on that?
I would definitely suggest you all do another, if this passes, do another motion authorizing Mr. Barbieri to do just that so that it would be automatic and make it really clear.
All right, if there's no further discussion on Dr. Robinson's first motion, on her motion, all in favor? Opposed? All right, I'm opposed to it, just for the reasons of independence. I don't want the public ever to think that we have the authority to remove an inspector general for something that we just have no reason other than maybe there's some personal reasons. And that's what it would look like, I think. I agree with the rest of you that we're taking a chance on Mrs. Michaels. She's got a 3-year contract, but there are provisions in the contract. If she doesn't live up to our expectations and she doesn't perform the way we want her to, her evaluation would allow us to terminate her for cause anyway. So, Dr. Robinson.
So let's clarify that, because that's not how I read the contract. So please point that out to me, because if I had seen where our evaluation, a poor evaluation would allow us to terminate the contract early, I would not have needed to bring this up. So it's a 3-year contract the way I read it. And it only talks about extensions the way I read it. So just please, somebody just make me understand that.
Mrs. Morales, are you there? My understanding is the way this would work is if we can just terminate her because if we give her a poor evaluation, that gets back to the lack of any kind of independence, because we can just decide we all want to give her poor just so we can get rid of her without any cause other than we don't like. So I mean, there is the evaluation would have to be based. A poor evaluation would have to be based on her doing something in the contract that required us to terminate her. I believe, Mrs. Rico.
Yes, thank you. So the termination for cause relates to and is based only on the following: neglect of duty, malfeasance, abuse of power or authority, discrimination, ethical misconduct, failure to maintain the certification as an inspector general at all times during the term of the contract, or for other good cause. So it would have to be, a performance-related issue, good cause, and those items like neglect of duty. Certainly, looking at the evaluation instrument, which I don't have in front of me right now, some of those items, may overlap into the evaluation, but these are specific in terms of a good cause, not great evaluation. Two different things.
Mr. Barbier, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Dr. Robinson, you want to finish up on that one, and then I'll go to Mrs. Whitfield.
Yeah, I didn't understand what the general counsel said. So is a poor evaluation legally good cause?
No.
Okay, so then, okay, so I just want to make sure that if you're correcting me or not. So my understanding is this based on this contract, we could give her a poor evaluation year after year, but she still has a contract until 3 years is up. That's how I'm reading this. So just get me straight now.
Okay. What I'm saying is there may be a nexus in the contract. I do not have the evaluation tool in front of me. There may be a nexus in the contract that covers some of these items, but essentially you have to have these items to stand and base your good cause termination, not merely a C- evaluation in and of itself. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know what the items in the evaluation tool are given this very moment, so I do not want to get caught up in, is there a section called good ethics? Maybe the individual fell below ethical issues and you're grading them on that in their evaluation, but the standalone items in this for cause are based upon neglect of duty, malfeasance, abuse of power, discrimination, ethical misconduct, failure to maintain the certification. So they may be also included in the evaluation, but they have got to be for cause basis.
And I guess that's what that's what I meant. I mean, the evaluation would reflect that she had violated one of those things in her contract, and we'd give her a poor evaluation based on that. But I see where you're coming from, Dr. Robinson. Bad evaluation on its face would not allow us to do that unless she's violated the terms of the contract. Otherwise, I think Mrs. Whitfield was next, and then Mrs. McQuinn.
All right, so I'm always trying to find some sort of common ground here, and I realize that nobody or the board doesn't want to go for a no cause, but what if we amended it so that it was a slightly less burden of proof? Because I feel like right now that level is so high that it's very difficult to prove that someone has gotten that off track, and I want to make sure that we're clear enough that we have the ability to control this position to some level. I want it to be independent, but I don't want her to just be here for 3 years and find out that she's doing a terrible job. I don't expect that will happen. I really don't, but I think we have gotten ourselves in places before where we have written things and then been stuck. And I just want to make sure we don't do that. I think it's just being prudent.
All right, Mrs. McQuinn, then Mrs. Brill.
Well, two things. One, we already voted on this. But secondly, when it says or other good cause, that says or. So we don't know what that other good cause is, but we do have or other good cause.
Ms. Brill, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So Mrs. McQuinn basically took the words out of my mouth. For Mrs. Whitfield, I don't really want any control of this position. I really feel that the independence is crucial, and I do agree that or other good cause covers us. So I know Dr. Robinson wants to speak, but I think we need to move on. We have voted and move on.
Dr. Robinson.
So let me just go back because never mind, let me not say that. So I just want to be crystal clear. What I understood our general counsel to say is other good cause, unless other good cause is not the evaluation. So let me just make up a scenario just so people understand what I'm saying. So let's pretend that there's just chaos in the office. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. I have no reason to believe this, so don't misunderstand me. But let's say that there's just a horrible working environment and everybody is just quitting left and right, right? Let's just pretend. Is that good cause?
Okay, now you're really getting into personnel.
Well, no, but the point is this. So it would be reflected in the evaluation. And so I'm going to pretend for the sake of the conversation that at least five board members would think, oh my goodness, that's not a good thing, right? We need to change horses in midstream, bad evaluation. Then does that mean then the contract can end? Because the way I read it, it does not. I don't need to continue this conversation forever, right? I'm fine with getting a legalized memo to clarify this stuff, but I think, and I want the record to reflect that I think it's a mistake to not have contracts that allow for a no-cause termination. I think that they should be super majorities, right? It's going to be very hard for some kind of little conspiracy theory where I don't like you to get me to get 5 votes, okay? So that does not interfere with the independence concept. But I mean, this is a live and learn thing for me. And so I'm fine if legal wants to give us a memo later.
Okay. Will do.
Mrs. Andrews, you got another question, comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment because I keep hearing about this position being independent. All of us sitting here as board, we've had an Inspector General for a long time. We have truly been respectful of the Inspector General's position and department and what they need to do. I've sat on this board for 10 years, and I know I respect the independence of the Inspector General. I think the kinds of discussions we're having here are really critical, that we kind of air out whatever the needs are before we begin someone new. So as far as independence, I have faith in all of us on the board to make sure that we always respect that. And so these kinds of discussions that we're having here are good discussions so that we can make the right decisions to move forward. This is a new experience for our new employee, which will be the Inspector General, and for all of us. But I have no doubt that all of us here as board members will respect independence. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no further motions, we'll move on with the next agenda item. We voted on that one already. Ms. Brill?
I don't think we voted on the actual
Please
contract.
vote on the main motion, please.
Okay, I thought it went 4-3, but the main motion was,
That was the amendment.
okay, that was the amendment. Okay, so we'll take a vote on the main motion to approve the contract for Mrs. Michaels. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-2 with Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Andrews in opposition. The next item on the agenda is P1, Mr. Superintendent, the
Wait,
personnel.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barbieri, I'm sorry to be disruptive. I couldn't get my mic on. I would just like the record to reflect that my problem was with the language in the contract. It has nothing at all to do with the individual who'll be stepping into the IG role.
No problem. Mrs. Board Clerk will make that notation in the minutes. The next item, Mr. Superintendent, is P1, personnel agenda.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. The motion was made by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, Mr. Superintendent, is P2.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the personnel addendum as submitted.
Motion by Mr. Whitfield, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. PIR1, COVID-19, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Barbieri, I think P2 was pulled.
P1 was pulled.
P1, excuse me.
P1, and I've been raising my hand to speak.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitfield. Mrs. Manders, I didn't see your hand. You're speaking on P2?
No, P1, that's the one that I pulled.
Okay. So let's go back to P1. We just took a motion on P1, so Mrs. Andrews, go ahead and speak on P1.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say about P1, this is the one that I spoke about, I guess, last week. With all the data, I sent a question in to see how we could find out the names of people behind this data. This is an annual report that has to be done by July 1 by statute. So this is a good thing. But as a board member, I think we need to kind of know sometimes the actions behind these reappointments. And so one of the questions I'd like to ask the superintendent first, maybe next year, before we go with this, because we've got to get it done, that before we bring this to the board, maybe have an individual discussion with me or any other board member that would want to know something. I looked at this and I looked under staff employees. That was one of the things I looked at. I saw 17 people that's administrators to teachers. So it sounded at the beginning like this was a good thing, but then I'm not quite sure if that's a good thing or not. Do we have administrators that are staff employees that are moving into teachers? Or is this someone that's an administrator that was at a school district that went to the staff that's being demoted? I'd like for someone to explain to me about what happens when I see the term administrator to a teacher. That's my first question. 17 people moving from administration to a teacher. Can somebody help me with that?
Yeah, I think as I understand the rules of this, every board member, the HR team is ready and able to sit with any board member that wants to go through this long list. But I'll turn it over to Dr. LaCava. Legal has given us some very clear rules on what to say and not to say.
So thank you, Dr. Fanoa. I just want to make sure I have Mark Mitchell on the line, and I know that he spent some time with board members throughout the week, and I know he was answering some of those questions. Mr. Mitchell, can you kind of share with the board in regards to that question that Mrs. Andrews is asking?
Mr. Mitchell, your microphone is off.
My apologies. Good afternoon, board members, and yes, Ms. Andrews, be happy to answer your question. The reappointment of administrators to teachers is reappointing, for instance, someone who may be a specialist or so forth at the district, or an administrator in school reappointed to a teaching position. And just to elaborate a little bit on this year's reappointment process, the board made some suggestions last year to enhance the process, and we've taken that to heart. And for this year, the process consisted of basically multiple phases. You know, the first phase being our HR partners work with principals and also with department heads during the year on any individuals for where there's concerns or any issues. And then the second phase of that is a review by the instructional superintendents with the regional superintendents. Then they send their proposals to the HR department for another review. Then that's reviewed by the chief of HR and the deputy superintendent with the regional superintendents, offering the rationale for their proposals. The next level of review goes to legal. Our legal department gets involved, and we coordinated meetings with legal and the regional superintendents, instructionals, chief of HR, deputy superintendent, and myself to review all those actions. So we thank the board for making recommendations to enhance the process, and I hope that helps address some of your questions.
Mrs. Andrews, your microphone's off if you want to speak.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to do next year is before we get to the time for this, that there be some more conversation, because as I look at this, there could be assistant principals or principals that's going back to teaching that I may not know about. I know there's thousands of papers that go with this, and you're going through a process within house. But I think it needs to be a little bit more communication and collaboration as to who we're talking about. As we look and we talk, we say we haven't laid off anybody, and I guess these people have poor performance or whatever is going on here. I think as a board member, I truly, as a board member, would like to know more information about, especially if staff employees that's going back to teaching, to make sure that those might be the right kinds of people to be in a teaching position. We haven't had any of those kinds of questions. We don't really know what's going on. As a board member, I certainly don't. And I worry about this whole piece with the numbers and not having enough information for me as a board member to approve. I'm going to approve it today with reluctance. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, did you have anything to follow up? Your microphone's still on. You're done?
Yes, sir. My comments are complete unless there's a further question.
Any other questions from the board on that? All right. Mr. Superintendent, that'll take us to PIR1, the COVID-19 rider for specialty leases.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve COVID-19 rider provisions for 2 specialty leases, the Everett Tennis Academy, LLC, and Motorcycle Training Institute, Inc., and authorize the board chair and superintendent to sign all necessary documents.
Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That's the end of the new business items. The next item on the agenda is BD1. It's a board discussion item by Dr. Robinson, delay start of school. Dr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you. So I suppose we all have been looking at the data. We all have our concerns about this pandemic. I think that most of us will realize that whenever school starts, there's going to be an increase, at least a blip, in the number of cases. And so my request, even though when asked, I responded that I thought maybe it would be in the September. My request is really to say that we need to be flexible in determining when school will open. I think it's unreasonable and unrealistic for us to determine today or next week when school will open. We need to see the numbers going down and not have a foreseeable blip up in determining that date. Because now I'm really thankful, let me say this, I'm thankful to the county commission for passing the expectation that people wear masks in public buildings. Hopefully that will decrease this fire of a virus that we have going on in Palm Beach County. But the point is that I just want us to have some flexibility to not feel the need to say today or tomorrow or in the near future when school will open, because we don't know what the epidemiologists know. in terms of predictions on what will happen. I mean, I can explain that more if you want, but it's really the say that I'm hoping that we will be flexible and make our decision based on what's happening with the pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. I believe the order I saw hands was Mrs. Whitfield, Mrs. Brill, and Mrs. Andrews. So Mrs. Whitfield first.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Robinson for bringing up both this topic and the next one. I think that it's really timely for us to have a conversation about this and where we stand. My comments for this one kind of roll into the next one, so please forgive me that I'm going to say a little bit more than just about the start date of school. But I really want school to start. I think that there are children that are really, really suffering from not being in school. And there are children who have been home without anybody watching them since March. I'm very, very concerned about that. I'm very worried that we're not only the biggest employer, but we're the biggest babysitter in the county. We watch children so their parents can go to work. I don't think we should fully open schools up. I think it would be best, well, I don't mean to say it like that. I think it would be best if we gave parents the opportunity to do distance learning. I would love them to be able to make those decisions on their own, but we have a lot of families that really rely on us. So I think what we need to do is we need to start school on August 10th, and then just give enough opportunities for parents to be able to keep their children home if they're able to, if their children were learning okay. I have a particularly very smart child who did distance learning diligently with teachers who showed up every day and taught her every day. 4 hours a day. She had an actual teacher speak to her virtually, and she tells me she didn't learn anything. She did well in school. She accomplished her classes, but she never really learned much in all that time. And I feel like that's our primary function. So if we can accomplish our primary function, but also do it in a way that protects children, I'd also like to thank the County Commission. I think that was a big decision that they made, and kind of took that burden off of us to make those decisions. So the last thing I want to say about that is I think we're going to have to look at what opening schools looks like for children who have some struggles and difficulties wearing masks all day. And I don't know that every child is going to be able to accomplish that. So we're going to have to find ways to space these kids out. Our kids that can't have things on their faces but really need one-on-one contact and someone to teach them are very little children. So that's kind of where my thoughts are. And I'd love to hear from the rest of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So I'm going to try to stay with my comments as much as I can on this particular item about the start date. But to start with, we don't know that September will be any better than August with regard to the virus. We're only in the second inning with more to come. But I agree with Dr. Robinson that we need flexibility. And at the same time, I think the public needs to know a date that they can plan with. I would like to know the results of our surveys. The overwhelming response from parents I have received is to open up our buildings for as much of a regular schedule as we can with flexibility if someone becomes ill. Undoubtedly, we will need to also provide a virtual track. I'm concerned about the pay gap employees will have if we delay our opening until September, but I'd rather have a pay gap than no job at all for our employees. I'd like to focus in our conversation next and continuing conversation on how we open safely and what the options are for our students and our employees regarding virtual and traditional classes. But right now at this moment, I would completely support starting after Labor Day, but I'd like us to consider that a permanent change so that we can finally align with the Northeast, where many teachers work in the summer and children attend camps. So if we are going to start after Labor Day, and I would suggest right after Labor Day, I think that it will parallel a lot of the requests that we've received from a number of constituents at our board meetings. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. One of the things I'd like to say, Dr. Robinson, I don't get a chance to say this to you, but you're the doctor that sits on this school board. And when you speak, I listen, especially when we're talking about medical issues and health-related issues. We're in trouble here in the state of Florida. As of just today, 5,511 new cases. The article was in the Sun Sentinel. That's right here in the state of Florida. One of my areas in my District 6, the far west region, has been spiking every single day. It's easy for us to say that we're going to get the survey. We're kind of behind Broward and Miami-Dade and some of the other big urban districts. I sit on that phone call with the Council of Great City Schools every Friday. I invite my fellow board members to sit on it with me because a lot of movement has happened in this arena as people put their frameworks together as to what they're going to do. And Broward just put out their 135-page document of frameworks on the kinds of things that they're looking at. We're waiting on the surveys and the teachers and the staff. We're looking at a whole lot of things, but we've got to listen to what's going to happen. We've lost a custodian here in Palm Beach County, has died based on COVID-19. You may not know that, but guess what? The staff members have called me to say, one of our custodians has passed away, Miss Andrews. Did you know that? I did not know that. So it's about the students' health right now. And that should be the guide to us as to where we're going. We need to get all of our data together to show whether we may go one track or another track or dual tracks and flexibilities. We've got to think about our teachers. Many of our teachers are at risk, okay? They're in the at-risk zone for age or underlying conditions, as well as our students. So when we see Florida and Palm Beach County outpacing Broward County, and we're smaller, we have trouble here in Paradise and Palm Beach County. And so, Dr. Robinson, I'm so happy you brought this up. I can't put my finger on any date right now to say to anybody, because I'm going to be following the CDC, state guidelines, and the health of boys and girls and the community before I decide anything. And Dr. Fenoy, I definitely hope that we will hurry up and get our frameworks so that we can begin to talk about the kinds of conversations that I hear from Broward and all these other big urban districts every week. They've been talking for months, and we're still trying to get there. So we got a lot of work to do just to be knowledgeable of what people want here in Palm Beach County. And I'm on more town halls to hear that. And we need to keep listening, but we have to listen with a keen ear for what's going to happen to people as far as their health and safety. And that's my number one priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Mrs. McQuinn.
Okay, yes. I have my notes, but my colleagues brought up a couple of more things. So I don't expect an answer to this right now, but this question is to the superintendent. I was not going to bring up the employee who has died, but I am aware of employees in school buildings now who are positive. And so I understand the need for privacy, I do, but as a board member, as I believe staff is aware of schools or departments where we have COVID illnesses, I don't know what that looks like, but I, as a board member, would like to be better informed. So that's off my chest. Wasn't going to bring that up, so thank you, Ms. Andrews. That done. Now, as to school opening, obviously we all have lots of thoughts. I'm just throwing this out there, and I realize for staff this is a nightmare, but it's a nightmare anyway, and at least we have other models to look at. For me, it would be great, and I know the majority of the parents that I hear from is that we open August 10th. If we could open August 10th, then we're getting good information, and there's no reason in the world that we can't contact every single parent in this school district. I'll do some calls if you like, but we can know what if we said we're opening August 10th. Some will be straight virtual. We won't open a school building with less than, and I'm not being facetious, what Dr. Robinson would be comfortable with. So, and I think our priority needs to be our elementary school students who are not supervised. And they should not, I mean, in other words, we need to bring our elementary kids back. Unless their parents don't want them back, then they do virtual. And then the next priority is middle school. And then the last priority is high school. And that's just in terms of their ability to supervise themselves. And truly, I would not have wanted my grandson supervising himself when he was in middle school. That frontal lobe is doing a whole lot better, but I wouldn't have wanted him alone during middle school. So hopefully he'll never hear this. I can't imagine he would. So that having been said, can we prioritize? We're going to have to know exact numbers. So can we use a high school campus to house middle school kids so we can spread them out better? They're just, I'm hoping we're doing some true thinking out of the box. So maybe we can open August 10th. Maybe if the pay gap is an issue, and I know it is, maybe we can stagger the start, so that those employees who say, look, I'd rather start mid to late September, let me do that, and I'll take a pay gap. And again, and all you have to do there is translate the union calendar onto whatever that looks like. Again, I'm really glad I'm not in charge of that, but it's doable. So I think that we needed this discussion, because let's do it safely, obviously. That's our decision. I know there are some who say, I don't want to wear masks and I don't want to do this. Well, our job is to keep people safe, because if they're not safe, we can't teach them. And if we don't have safe teachers, they're teaching them. So I know I'm going on about this, but I'm so glad to be able to finally get some of my thoughts out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQuinn. Ms. Brill, and then Mr. Shaw. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Robinson, I believe I had you written down first, then Ms. Brill, then Mr. Shaw.
Well, that's okay. I can defer because I know Mr. Shaw hasn't spoken on this yet.
No,
so.
Go ahead, Dr. Robinson, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So, well, first let me say, Mrs. McQuinn, you're a woman after my own heart. So clearly you've been losing sleep over this too. So let me just say this. In my mind, when I say school, I'm talking about inside of a building. As far as I'm concerned, we can start virtual tomorrow, right? To me, that's not school. I get it makes us feel good, and there are some children, as I understand, who actually benefited from it. But I don't think that we are living up to our own expectations using virtual as a methodology, right? So let me say this. I was told yesterday that the number of new cases in Palm Beach County day by day is 4 times what it was when we shut schools down in March. Okay, that is like staggering, right? But we're not shutting things down because of all these other competing interests, right? The purpose of my bringing this up today, and I'm rolling both of my discussion items together, as we've already started doing, is to talk about what the medical science says we need to do. Because the first rule of medicine is do no harm, right? I was a physician before I was a school board member. I'm going to advocate to do what I think is in the best interest of children, families, and community. And the first thing is to make sure that they are alive to the best of my ability, right? And now, definitely, our primary role is education. That's our primary responsibility. And I'm very clear to Mrs. Whitfield's point that we started off with the educational debt as manifested by the achievement gap, right, which we have yet to remedy, but it exists. Then we put COVID-19 slide on top of it and summer slide on top of it. So yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely love to be able to reopen schools tomorrow, but we can't do it safely. That's the whole point. And I need to make sure that we're not doing harm. And so we also need to understand that we are not going to get the risk to zero, but we can do risk reduction. And so we will have to have layers of things that we do inside the schools to keep our children, and the children take it home, right? So the children, families, community, and our staff safe, right? right? I'd be happy to send you guys even more and more articles and studies on this. But I need us to start with the medical science. We brought up some really good points in terms of competing interest, right? In my world, we have to, the safe way would be to work with community partners like the Youth Services Department of Palm Beach County and some of the nonprofits to have a network of out-of-school places that children can go where they can also follow the rules to keep them safe there, but we're not crowding them in our schools. And so, I guess I'm gonna have to download the Broward plan because I'm just clear we have to be safe with this. Now, the way it's going now, the incidence is skyrocketing, right? Right? And mark my word, what you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 weeks is data that shows that people getting infected now are these young adults. Watch, right? Now, it's still going to be disproportionality like with almost every other infection with elderly people dying, right? But the people getting infected are going to be young adults. But this is the other thing I want us to think about as we show concern for children that we have failed to actively engage in their own education. The medical science will tell you that the reason you had such a hot spot in New York, in addition to planes coming into New York, was just the crowded living conditions. And the reason that there's a disproportionality in certain communities having infection is because of the living conditions, right? Many households are not able to spread out as much as I can, for example. Or if somebody became infected in their household, they can't actually quarantine just because of the living conditions. So it spreads through the household. So those are likely to be poor people or Black people, Latino people. Who are the students that we are failing to educate? The poor children, the Black children, the Latino children, the same community, right? So I just need us to be very, very clear that whenever we open schools, and when we do the things that need to be done for education, that we need not do anything that adds to the potential harm to these families, okay? And so I'm hoping now that the county has said people have to wear masks inside, so maybe we'll stop seeing these pictures of everybody drinking and partying with no mask on, that hopefully then this incident will start to subside. I'm gonna bet good money it's gonna uptick after Labor Day, right? But maybe it'll go down enough in August that I will say, okay, good. August 10th is a magic date, or maybe it's later in the month of August. My point in bringing this discussion item about the delay is it can't be based on the calendar. It has to be based on the epidemiology, because we must do everything that we can to keep our children, our families, our community, and our staff members as safe as we possibly can. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Dr. Robbins. Ms. Brill and then Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. So I am totally clear that we have to keep people as safe as possible, but we have to find a way to open up safely. We cannot stay closed for an entire year. This virus is not going away. I understand communities where the virus spreads more because of living conditions, but I'll just share with you what I experienced last week. I found out I was exposed, which is why I missed part of the beginning of our board meeting. I was exposed to COVID. I went and got tested. When we called about the testing, what we were told is that even though, none of us were quarantined, they told me everyone in my household would have it. So by the time you find out you're exposed, and this was before having any symptoms, we tested negative, fortunately, but by the time you find out you're exposed, you've already infected everybody in your community. And so, yes, it does spread. To tag along with Ms. McQuinn's comments, I think we need to reopen at all levels. My vision is to offer brick and mortar, virtual, and the ability to move between the two. My problem with staying only virtually is we all know that a lot of our children are not learning. They are in homes which we cannot help the fact that it's abusive, but it's mentally weighing on them. We have to deal with that. This is such a hard task for us. I mean, just trying to figure out how do we keep our employees safe. I like the idea possibly of shared facilities, but I think that along with the epidemiology, I don't disagree with Dr. Robinson on that. I think we also have to talk to the superintendent and find out what he needs to put in place in these schools for us to keep everybody safe. We need to know those hard numbers of who's going to go back to the classroom, how do we socially distance, what does this look like? And so I'd like to hear from the superintendent, whether it's this week or next, can he be prepared to open on August 10? If not, then we need to continue that conversation. And again, I've said it before, but I'm all for opening after Labor Day. Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I mean, obviously we have a workshop next week. We're crunching the data. To Dr. Robinson's point, you know, we have the Superintendent's Health Advisory Council. I was invited to a great meeting last night with some other public health officials. So to sum up my notes, there is no easy answer. Just call it what it is. And we all know that. And so, but the team is working hard. We're thinking about all these things. The social distancing in our schools is going to be a challenge, period. You know, when I speak to a lot of the elementary school principals, you know, even teaching reading, you know, this is something I should know this since I'm a certified reading teacher, but we would need to buy clear face shields. You can't use a mask and teach reading because kids have to see your mouth, right? Like it's all these intricacies associated with the health and the education. And again, we all are feeling the tension between the economics, people wanting to go back to work, and safety. But then, you know, we have the other question, you know, if we don't go back to school, then for us, the business side of the district, how do we maintain our payroll and the workforce? And so, as you know, there's no easy answers, but we will begin that process of narrowing it all down this week. We will definitely be talking to the board next week about the survey results. And the target date for us to make final decisions is the 15th. I am absolutely open to whatever the board decides in terms of us pushing the time back. So I'm willing to listen to anything, and I think we'll have to come to some conclusions about that. But I think, you know, there is no hard answer today, because one of the things I'm realizing, I intentionally don't watch the news on the weekends, but when I wake up Monday morning, everything in the world has changed. And so, you know, so I may absolutely believe that I'm sending my kid back on the 10th, and I may send them back on the 10th, but I also may pull them out on the 11th. And I want that experience, this educational experience, to still be solid. And so, you know, I guess all of us are saying a bunch of stuff because we don't really know the final answer, but we're definitely committed to working towards that answer, and we will have one. So next week we should begin that process with the board.
All right, so the next order of speakers are Mr. Shaw, Mrs. Whitfield, Mrs. Andrews, and Dr. Robinson. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. I think there's been a lot of really good points that have been made today. And I think the good news is that when Dr. Robinson said that part of this discussion was the issue of flexibility, I don't think we have to make a decision on flexibility. I think that flexibility is with us no matter what decision we make. And I think Dr. Fenoy's point that his son could go back to school one day and then be off the next day, I think that's the reality we're in. And I think another thing that I need to be comfortable with is that I think there is a big difference between remote learning and virtual learning. And I think that that's a major issue before we make a decision on what model we use. We have to know that if we're going to do remote learning, that's not good. If we're doing virtual education with curriculum and materials and the technology that's appropriate to virtual education, that's a whole different conversation and not what we've had, because it's just a different world. I think that the issue also, part of this discussion is we're coming close to the time that last week we heard a report, or a couple weeks ago, about the issue of athletics. We've got students in high school that are ready to go back for for summer training and everything. We need to have some direction on that one. You know, we hear a lot of things from different counties. I think the realistic part is that we are Palm Beach County and we've got to deal with what we have. But part of that realistic position is we're going to be impacted by what happens in other counties, because people read the newspaper and see what happens in other counties. Another part of this that we need to be cognizant of, at least, is that charter schools don't have this same conversation as a group. Those charter schools have the independence to operate on a calendar that they want, unless the contract we have with each one of those charter schools provides that they have to provide, or they have to follow the district's calendar. But opening and stuff, there may be flexibility issues there with charter schools that may put us in an interesting position. And I think staff needs to check all of those charter school contracts and make sure that, see what the provisions are. I know when I was dealing with it, charter schools had to follow the district start and ending date, but there was some flexibility in there. Another thing is, and I think this is a realistic part of where we are today, we're having a conversation, as I think each one of you have said, our conversation has been about educating children in the safest manner that we can possibly do. But the conversations outside the school district and around the country, many of those conversations are politically driven and have nothing to do with the safety or welfare of students and parents. And I hope that we can keep that focus on, because that's where we've got to be. If we start on August 10th, that's fine. If we start on August 17th, if we start after Labor Day, that's fine. I just want us to have enough information to know that we're doing it in the safest manner. But we've got to also realize that parents have got to go to work, and they're pretty much at wit's end at this point of having to deal with this. And also, obviously, I think several of you talked about it also, that impact that we have on staff, because we can put staff in a very difficult position. And I think it was Mrs. McQuinn who talked about the issue, or somebody about the pay gap. I made a call to the district today and just asked, what happens if we pay people and we're not allowed to do that? What are the consequences for us as a district? How do we protect them? So I think there are a lot of things. And I'm glad that next week, I take it that Dr. Fenoy, that next week's workshop will be on this topic. And if so, I think that's a good time. And I'm glad we had this conversation today, because we really did bring up a lot of the issues that we had. Let me just add one other piece to this one. We've got to be cognizant that we have teachers and parents that about that same time in August are going to be taking their children away to college. So that may pose another issue, not directly that impacts any one of us, but that will impact principals all over this county, and many of our teachers, as parents have to leave and go away, and then there's no assurance that they don't get to that school and turn right around and come back because something has happened with this virus. So this is a picture that's not this big. This is a picture off the screen. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mrs. Whitfield, and Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just wanted to add a couple more points. I just wanted to say that I do believe very strongly in public health. Obviously, that was my degree, and I think you can totally make people uncomfortable just to make sure that we keep people safe. That is fine by me, but I think that the balance that I want to talk about today is, I think right now we are already doing harm. I do think that what we're doing by trying to educate the way we did over the after spring break has not done anything to help these children. So many children weren't able to learn, and that is also a problem. I do worry about the abuse numbers. I really do. I'm very concerned about the kids eating. I'm very concerned about our children being left home alone. That keeps me up at night too. So I think that, when we start talking about choosing as a school board what is best for our community, we have to look at all the risks and balance them all. So to me, the most prudent decision that we can make is to allow the parents to choose for their children what works best for them. I loved reading the Pasco article that Mr. Katz sent to us about the way they were opening, because it really put the parents in the driver's seat to decide, does my child need to go back? Are they safer at school than they are at home? And I think for a lot of our For a lot of our families, the answer is yes. They are safer with a caring adult watching them. And I think we as a school board have to make every effort we can to mitigate the risks from COVID while making sure that we are really cognizant of the risks of abandonment, what we're doing. So that's the biggest concern that I have, going forward, that we look at all of the different pieces of this. And that's my concern. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And these are great conversations. And it's a lot to do with the budget. I mean, when you begin to look at all the scenarios that we may have to consider, we've got Dr. Fenora has to come up, and I guess the task force and all the other people who've been working on this will have to kind of tell us, if we start with a hybrid or blended model, how much that will cost as we work through things, as well as if we begin to go back fully, how much would that cost? We're thinking about our bus drivers. They're concerned. Some of the bus drivers don't want to drive anymore. So how are we going to make sure that we can get the children back and forth to school? When you start looking at the frameworks that's being done by these major school districts that are the same size that we are, they've been grappling with these questions, and they've been putting some things together. For us to have a real meaningful conversation, we do have to have this data that we're asking for about the budget. How much would it cost for us if we went one way or the other? If we start on August 10th fully, how much more money is it going to cost? Will we be able to cover it for 6 months or for a year, or will we be short of monies? I worry about all of those pieces, and I'm certainly worried about the teachers who are really concerned, because many of them need to be able to weigh in. We've got to have teachers to do the job. Now, Mr. Katz and the Classroom Teachers Association was really good with us on the first end, from March until we finished. We didn't have any specialized CTA union agreements. Most of these big urban districts had big time union agreements with the teachers as to what they would do for distance learning. SEIU now is going to be a big factor with their people. Maintenance and plant operations. If we're telling the custodians to come back, are they going to be tested? How are we working with them to make sure that they feel safe? They're afraid to come back to work. When you begin to do a full-scale operation, you've got to have all those pieces in play. What I enjoyed reading about in some of these other urban districts like Broward and San Diego and some of the rest of them, that they had a plan, and then they could work through it, and you could narrow down the things you can and cannot do. This will help you to decide whether you're going to open or not, and can you keep the children safe based on where you are and what you need to do. But we're going to have to have some really engagement with our unions to get the buy-in to open up, if we're talking about opening up on August the 10th or 17th or in September or whatever. Because if you don't have the human resources that you need, nobody's opening anything. And that has to be a high level of conversation. Many of our greatest teachers are the senior teachers, and some of them are afraid to come back to work. So we know we're going to have flexibility for them, as well as students with underlying health issues, as well as just where we are in the scheme of time in the state of Florida and right here in our own Palm Beach County. And it's a day-to-day look as to where you evaluate, but you do need the data. That's why the town halls are important, the surveys are important. Put together what we can do, what we can't do, and begin to do processes of elimination of what's going to be best for the children, for the families, for our employees to move to the next level. And we could be sitting right here in September without school open, because we've got to have the data first before you can make any decisions. This is wonderful today, but we better get the information and begin to have a process of elimination based on that data and where we are with our health and safety issues.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. So, board members, we've got two more, Dr. Robinson and Ms. Brill. I suggest that we take these last two people speaking, and then, I mean, all of this stuff is going to be hashed out again next week at a workshop. I think that superintendent's heard all of you loud and clear what you think the major concerns are, and so if we can kind of cut off the conversation after the next two, and we'll wait till next week to get back into it at the workshop. So the next two speakers are Dr. Robinson and Ms. Brill.
Okay, thank you. So yes, there's a lot of things that have to be considered, but I'm going to start with the public health piece, right? I feel like that's my job, and I'm going to do my best to make sure you guys understand it. Now, I understand that we are going to end up making decisions that are not in 100% alignment with what public health would say. We have all these competing interests. Ms. Whitfield has outlined some of them very well, right? And I understand and appreciate those. But the reason I brought this conversation up was I hope I was mishearing, but I thought maybe I was hearing that maybe we were going to make decisions based upon parent surveys. And I'm like, no, we must start with the science, right? Yes, we listen to parents, and we make sure that we have, I said this like early on in this pandemic, we have to have multiple options available for parents, right? The parents are going to choose. I can promise you this grandmama will choose if our only options are stay home and full school. This grandmama will choose that her grandchildren will not be in those crowded schools. I can promise you that, right? Now, along that note, we cannot, anytime in the foreseeable future, open school regular, right? We cannot. We have to have risk reduction techniques in there. We have to have the 6-foot spacing, right? We just have to. I sent a question in, and Mrs. Paul is going to get the information out about who has looked at this classroom is this size, how many students could fit in there. I don't even know how many of our schools could do 50% of the children at one time and maintain the social distancing required. And so that's a math problem. That has to be outlined. Dr. Fenoy mentioned a red light, green light year. Absolutely, because the other thing we have to get ready for is to go from total virtual to hybrid, and at some point full school, and then whether or not do we have to go back? How far back do we have to go? And the science should tell us that, not how we feel, not the applause, right? It has to be based on science. And so I'm actually going to work with some public health people on some metrics to help guide those decisions to present to the board and the staff. But when we allow students back into the buildings with staff, then there's risk reduction that has to take place. And there's multiple levels that have to take place. And so one of the things that actually I hadn't thought about, and this is why it's so good to talk to staff and the parents, is those things you didn't think about. But we're going to have some staff who are unable, based on their job description, to maintain the social distancing from students or maybe even other adults. Those staff need to wear N95 masks or face shields, right? So we have to dig into the science of this to adequately protect our students and staff. I'm looking forward to the future conversation, and just be ready to see the articles I'm gonna start sending from the Journal of the American Medical Association and everybody else, because I need you to understand at least some of what I understand about what happens if we don't do this right. And the people who want to say, well, children don't die, well, some children do die, but that's not the point. We also are starting to see more and more science about the lingering effects on people who were infected and recovered. Okay? Not 100%. So I'm just saying the decisions we make will impact generations of people. And so we can't just, turn the other, and say, okay, it's just the elderly or whatever, because there's still, children, our students deserve to have their grandmamas, right? I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to let it go. But I need you to understand it. So if there comes a point in time that I start slamming the table in these meetings and pushing back on the discussion, I want you to understand where that's coming from. Hopefully we won't go there. Thank you.
I hope so too, Dr. Robinson. Ms. Brill?
Thank you. And so, Dr. Robinson, I completely respect your opinion, but I have to tell you that I've got a doctor, a pediatrician in my district who's slamming on the table and telling me things like what Mrs. Whitfield said about the children being home. And one of the pieces I want to again reiterate is the mental health support. These children are going to need, whether we do distance learning, virtual learning, or in the building. This has taken a terrible toll on our employees as well in terms of their mental health, but, you know, children as well. I am looking forward to hearing from the health task force, but, you know, I'm getting conflicting information from medical people and conflicting scientific information. So I think that whatever we do, we just need the public to know that the safety of our employees and our students is of paramount importance to us. I'm hopeful that the teachers and the employees that cannot go back, that perhaps they can be doing the virtual distance piece, and those that can, because I do have a lot of teachers in my area that are itching to go back as well. So I look forward to the conversation next week. I'm very interested in hearing what the task forces have advised also. Hopefully Dr. Fenoy will include that in the feedback that we're getting. But I thank Dr. Robinson for bringing up these important topics, because it's about time we talked about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next item is a board discussion item that I put on there. It was pretty imperative that we discuss it tonight, but the things have changed. So I wanted to discuss the meeting protocols for July, because as all of you probably know, the executive order allowing for virtual board meetings was going to end the end of June. So I want to tell you about what happened yesterday. So yesterday morning, Representative David Silvers called me, and we were talking about some other issues. And he was asking how things were going. And I said, well, this was a perfect example. I mean, nobody has the answers. We all have questions, and the parents are all in different places, and so are the teachers. So he actually said to me, and I had just gotten off the phone with Mrs. Rico talking about the executive order, and he said, is there anything that I can do to help you? Because I've got great contacts up in Tallahassee in the governor's office. And I said, yes. I said, if you can explain to the governor that we need to figure out a way to continue the virtual meetings for the school board. I said, I'm 70 years old. I said, I've got colleagues on the board that do not feel comfortable coming back into this building and sitting at this dais. And which view of that is, and I'm looking at some of you right now, but I said, we really need the governor to understand we need an extension on that. So it wasn't like 3 hours later that Mrs. Rico sends me a text message and said the governor extended the virtual meetings until the end of July, beginning of August. And so I called the Representative Silvers back, and he said, well, I talked to them. I have a friend that's very close to the governor in the governor's office, and she said she'd get it done, and she did. And so I told him we probably should name the boardroom after him, because he was able to get this done for us. But if you talk to Representative Silvers, you can thank him for getting that done, because I understand that we had tried to go through Mr. LaFace, who does an excellent job for us, and he was reluctant even to go to the governor because he thought the governor would react very badly about not opening up the boardrooms and having everybody come back. So when you see Representative Silvers, please thank him for that. But with that said, and I see Ms. Brill, you have your hand up, but we still need to discuss, Dr. Fenoy, how are we going to open up the meetings now in August? So hopefully you can come back with some ideas for us, and then give us an opportunity to weigh in on that before a decision is made. Since they are board meetings, certainly the board should be consulted about how we're going to do these meetings.
So the team, Chief Kitchero's team and Wanda's team have already outlined that. Obviously, we had that one meeting before we all left. So we have some ideas, and we'll bring that back, because it is ultimately the board's decision. And so we'll have that for you.
Okay, Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. So clearly I'm in the minority, because I really was hoping if somebody's feedback is there. There you go. So clearly I'm in the minority, because I was willing to go back in July. I've been watching the county commission meetings, and what they have done is on their dais, they have put up partitions, plexiglass partitions, and they do have people that are out in the public area where they are distanced. They mark off off seats. And then when the room is full, they have people waiting outside also. So I think that's something we can look at. I do feel a little disconnected to the public when we have our meetings this way because we cannot interact and see them, getting them to call in. It's just not the same thing. But, you know, clearly, since the majority of the board would prefer to wait to do the face-to-face, I'm fine with it. I just don't know how we talk about opening up schools when we're not even opening up our board meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. Mrs. Andrews, then Mrs. McQuinn.
Yes, and I'd like to find out why can't we have a way for our speakers to actually come in on Google Meets? I mean, the recording thing is just really, it's outdated right now. If we're going to be virtual through Google Meets, why can't we provide our speakers the opportunity to come in through Google Meets, especially if we're going to be out for another month. You're going to have a lot of parents that will want to have input and come to our meetings through the Google Meets, but to do this recording is a little bit, to me, not nice to our constituents and our community to have them just do a recording. They need to be seen. So I would love to see, if we're going to continue this the way we're doing right now, have a way for those people to come in and be able to be a part of these meetings so that they can be seen and heard with their suggestions.
All right, Ms. McQuinn and then Mrs. Whitfield, but let me just make a suggestion. I mean, this boardroom is great big and it's empty, and I have no issue, Dr. Fenoy, if we can figure out some way to bring speakers in here and let them sit in chairs all through here, and we'll call them up one at a time to the podium. They can actually see you and you can see them, and then they can speak. If we can figure out a way to bring them into the building safely and then exit them back out. So you might want to consider that, because certainly I'm just fearful if we get these people on the telephone. I'm trying to run a meeting, and I mean, I don't even know how we cut them off, and they could ramble on forever, and and without me turning off their. So anyway, it's difficult enough to handle with the 7 of you, with the 6 of us, but without. So that's just a suggestion that I have. So Mrs. McQuinn.
I like that, Mr. Barbieri. Bring them in.
Okay, so I brought this up some time ago about the fact, well, when the county commission started meeting live, and I feel confident that if one or more of them didn't want to do that, they wouldn't have to. And I don't have a problem with my temperature being taken, and I don't have a problem with July 1st. We go ahead with our virtual workshop. I think that's going to have a lot of information, et cetera, and then people can react to what is presented at that July 1st workshop when we have our next meeting. I do want to thank Dr. Robinson for putting this on as a discussion item, because I don't think that, I know that there's not one of us who's going to make a vote based on political pressure, because frankly, if I voted for one, then I'm disappointing somebody else. But I appreciate the opportunity to finally hear each other, because we haven't had that opportunity yet. And I think that maybe even we might have brought some ideas to staff. So I just appreciate that opportunity to speak and letting you know that barring something unforeseen, I'm all for getting back to live meetings, at least for myself. I'm very comfortable coming back with the protocols that the county has taken.
Thank you, Ms. McQuinn. Before I get to Mrs. Whitfield, I see the General Counsel's got her hand up. Mrs. Rico.
Thank you. I just wanted to recommend to the board, and I've recommended this to leadership and Dr. Fenoy, that we develop not only protocols about the public returning into the building and into board meetings, but that we create a policy that the board then votes on, so that members of the public have expectations about what they'll be required to do and how that will be handled, and making sure that we've got that clearly articulated. And so we're working toward bringing, I believe, a policy to you all for July 15th when you have your next action meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Rico. Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. So I could go either way on this. I would be happy to meet in person again with the social distancing in the boardroom. I think we could do a good job of that. But two things that I think are important. One, I really do want the public to have a better opportunity to participate. That's been frustrating me from the beginning. I think from what I understand, there's an ability that you can actually call a person from within Google Meet. So if we choose to do it on virtually, we could actually put them on live, let them speak, and then you could cut them off at 3 minutes, just like you would in the boardroom. And then the other thing that I think is really important is that I don't like when we have a partial in person and partial on the phone. I've called into a few meetings. I have to say it's super difficult to participate. I think if we choose to do it in person, and then, for instance, like Dr. Robinson doesn't want to come back, I think her voice wouldn't be as heard, and I think my voice wouldn't be as heard. I think it's a little challenging, some in and some out. So I think we should try to make a collective decision on this, and if we choose partially not to go back, that we should just stay virtual, because this isn't bad. I like this. I'm happy to chat with you guys this way.
Thank you, Ms. Whitfield. Me too. Anybody else want to speak on this one? All right, so the superintendent will bring us back the plan that I guess.
Yeah, I want to set one expectation. We really looked hard at a way to have you guys like in the boardroom, but we still use the Google platform. And something about the technology with multiple Google Classrooms in the same space with the network caused all kind of feedback loops and problems like that. So, but we're going to still explore. So we have plans to bring people in the building. Chief Kitzro's team, they have all those protocols. Obviously, they've been manning the building for over 100 days. And so we have temperature checks. There's things that we can do. Again, we have the last meeting we had in place. We can go back to that option. I think the one piece that I think we're struggling with is what Ms. Whitfield is speaking to. If we have people in place, the only area that we know will work consistently is the bridge. And so it's this platform with people like Mr. Barbieri is alone right now, but if we put multiple people in that space, all of you can't be on Google Meets and talk. It just creates all kind of disruptions, but we're going to still explore that. But we'll bring back multiple options, and whatever the board decides, we'll be ready to go.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I'm going to dig out my notes. In one of those earlier meetings that Mrs. Andrews refers to with the Council of Great City Schools, they talked about how they were having their board meetings virtually. I want to say it was San Diego, but I have to double check. They talked about, I didn't really understand it, but they talked about using Zoom with, what's the name of it, YouTube, and somehow bringing people in and out. But I remember that since I didn't understand, I put the name of the person that was their tech person in the notes. And I actually sent that in, I think, to everybody in the board office group, but I'll dig it out and see if I can find that. But the other thing is that this, the thing that we're using for these town halls is StreamYard. So I used that with, I was on a panel discussion with Florida Memorial, and it was really neat because they brought people in and out, right? And so I'm just saying, if we look like we might be in virtual land for meetings for a longer time, maybe we need to explore that as an option for the meetings, and in that way we could see and hear the public. But yeah, it's just food for thought.
No, that's a good point. I think what we have been avoiding was paying for a platform. So I think your point is, if we're going to extend it, let's maybe do some research and pay for a platform that isn't. Google Meets works for us because it's part of our daily living, and we just didn't realize we had all these features, which we will never go away from. But it may be worth exploring a product to actually do all of these things. So I'll put that on the agenda for tomorrow.
All right, the next board discussion item is by Mrs. Andrews, a resolution condemning racism request. Mrs. Andrews.
Yes, and I think all of you should see a copy of it. It's from the Florida School Boards Association. They just discussed it at the last meeting, and they're requesting, if you'd like to use it, we're now in real difficult times as it relates to racism, and making sure that we can put our point out there, I think is very important. I read through this resolution resolution. I love it, and I'm hoping that you all can adopt it and we can bring it back to the board and vote on it if that's something you like.
Mrs. McQuinn, then Mrs. I don't know who I saw next, but I saw Mrs. McQuinn.
I read it several times, and I would not change one word. Now, I do like to wordsmith, so I might change enjoyable, but actually I couldn't think of a better word than enjoyable. So I actually like every word in it.
Mrs. Whitfield, that's the hand I saw. Go ahead.
Thanks. I wanted to agree with Mrs. Andrews. I really love it. I love that you brought this to us. Just like Mrs. McQuinn said, that one word stood out to me. The one really was sanctuary. I liked that a lot. I like believing that our schools are a safe place for our families. And so I really liked that about it. And I would love to put something like this up.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So I completely agree. I read it. I love it. I think it's fine the way it is. My concern is that we, I don't want to wait too long. Next week's the workshop. This is a special meeting. I mean, are we able to move forward with it, or do we have to bring it back? So that's a question for legal.
Okay, well, you do have to, because this is not on the agenda to vote on. So it would be vote to bring it back. But perhaps you could, and our next action meeting is July 15th. I mean, the proper way to do is to vote to bring it back and vote on it at your next special meeting.
Mrs. McQuinn?
I do like the immediacy. However, so often in the last how many years has something been front and center, and then we kind of let it just die off. So maybe it's not a bad thing to come back on the 15th, and when we show that we continue with our commitment to that.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, sorry, I couldn't unmute. So, yeah, I mean, I'll support this, whether it's today or next time, whatever. But, I'm like pretty tired of resolutions. I'm pretty tired of marches. I'm pretty tired of protests. So my question is, are we ready to say that we want the Palm Beach County School District to work to become an anti-racist school district? Or are we just going to do resolutions?
I think you know how we all feel about that.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Members, let's chime in. I'll go with District 1 first. Mrs. McQuinn, are you?
Oh, thank you for asking me, because I think I brought this up a while ago too, is what exactly specifically are we going to do? And we don't have to, we need to start with something. So let's start with something.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. So I feel similarly. I really, and I know Mrs. Rico got annoyed at me when I said this last time, but I think we need to review our policies and see which ones are not in alignment with our values. I think this is the time to do it. And I know we can't review every policy, but there's got to be some way that we can look into this and realize which ones don't fit. So that's how we make change at the school district, is through policy. So we should make sure that they line up with what we care about. So, but yes, I would love to take real action. I think that would be amazing. It would be a good legacy of this board.
Ms. Brill?
Yes, I'm completely on board. And I'm looking forward to also seeing that course that was going to be brought back to go up to the state. But, it's time to really take action on ending racism and equity across the board. And let's be a model. We've been a model across the state for many other things, but, sometimes I feel like it's almost too late. Dr. Robinson has been talking about this for a very long time to us, and I'm just glad that we're finally putting a voice to it.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes, I agree with everything that everybody said to this point, so I'm ready to move forward on this one.
Mrs. Mrs. Andrews. I know where you speak, where you're at, because you're the one that put the resolution there. Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will be doing is, as I'm sitting on the council meetings each Friday, we're getting what other districts, the 76 other districts such as us, that's out there making the changes, and I will get those things that they're doing and get them to you ASAP.
Great. And of course, I agree with you, Dr. Robinson. I don't know which one of my colleagues said we should start with looking at the policies and seeing what needs to be put in the policies, because the policies guide the district on how they're supposed to handle these kinds of issues. So we certainly should take a look at the policies and see where we're at. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate hearing that from my colleagues. It feels like I've been waiting 20 years to hear that. So I want to remind you, we have an equity policy. We should review it and then maybe have conversation about, and what does that mean? And just so you know that I, as well as Keith Oswald and a couple others, have been invited to be part of ongoing series that the Racial Equity Institute has called Black Pearls, which will be tomorrow at 1:30. So I'll try to find the electronic information and send it to you in case you're interested. And I also try to start pulling some information and just sharing it for your consideration. I will tell you this: Children's Services Policy, Children's Services Council is outlining an equity plan that will be presented to the council in the near future. And so it's kind of frustrating for me to sit on CSC and watch them move faster than the school district in this regard. So I will start sharing more information with you and then possibly bring forward other discussion items about how we might possibly move forward. But we have an equity policy. We just need to act like it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Mrs. Andrews, you want to make a motion that we bring this back when we put it on the agenda for the next scheduled meeting? If in the meantime a special meeting is called by the superintendent for something, we'll put it on that one, but otherwise it'll be on the July 15th meeting. Would you like to make a motion to that effect, Mrs. Andrews? Mrs. Andrews, you still there?
Can you hear me now? I move that we bring the resolution condemning racism and affirming the district's commitment to the inclusive school environment for all, bring it back to be approved by the board.
All right, and that's seconded by Dr. Robinson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Mrs. Whitfield? You have a comment, Mrs. Whitfield?
Sorry, I was having mute issues. I just was thinking about what Dr. Robinson said about reviewing the equity policy. Should we make that motion also? I'd be happy to do that. I make that motion that we review the equity policy and bring that back.
Okay, let me finish this one. We'll hold that one for a second. There's no more discussion on Mrs. Andrews' motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mrs. Whitfield?
So I think we should make a motion to come back to that equity policy and look at it again and see what it really means to us.
I said, you know, are we just going to put that on as a board discussion item, which we already have, or are we going to bring it back as a workshop? I mean, what's your pleasure if we're going to discuss that?
I think it has to be a workshop, doesn't it?
I would think so, yes.
Really spend some time.
Okay, so you make a motion that we get a workshop scheduled.
Yes,
for,
please.
we have a second on that, Dr. Robinson? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The last item on the agenda this evening is the board.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one statement?
Yes,
so now that the board has made that decision, I'll have staff put in the board office, or have your assistants send you the equity policy beginning tomorrow for your review. I will ask the board though, I do not want to do a workshop until we figure out what we're doing with school. I need 100% of our attention on opening schools right now. So we can schedule it later, but I need you to hear that loud and clear. We need to be all in on figuring out school right now. So I'll have Mr. Tierney, he'll call all the board members probably tomorrow evening. And you know, he keeps the calendar of our workshop, so we'll get it scheduled, but we'll commit to putting the equity policy in the board office so you can start doing your own homework, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. The last item then is the board discussion on Mrs. Andrews, survey students on school police services. Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And as you know, that I sit for you as your representative on the Juvenile Justice Advisory Board, as well as the Criminal Justice Commission, and your representative for the Council of Great City Schools. And this item on school policing has been something that we've been discussing every Friday in our meetings. And one of the things I've learned from being in those meetings is these school districts ask the question, how and when have we asked students how they feel about the police? And some of the schools have already started surveying the students, beginning that process for the next school year. And this is something that I think we should do. I asked around to see if we had ever surveyed our students about the services of school police, and I was told that we don't do that, or we have not done that. And I do appreciate the information that's coming in from our Chief Kissero, on our history and the police department, and the future questions that you see me sending out is because of the work that I'm having with others. But this is one that I think when school starts, I'd love to see us survey our students on school police services.
Ms. Andrews, I have some good news. The communications team and Chief Kitsero are already designing that survey, again, to be released once the kids come back. And so that team will speak more in reference to that when they schedule the workshop.
Yay, we love that. Good news.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders and Dr. Fenoy. That take us to the end of the agenda. I just wanted to bring you up to speed. The contract with Ms. Bernard is basically finished, but I didn't want to put two on tonight with all these other things. So there wasn't the urgency there was like with the Inspector General policy getting in place. So I'm planning on bringing that back to you at the July 15th meeting so we can discuss it. In the meantime, the General Counsel's office is going to get it out to all of you with the memo explaining, anything that's might be. They're going to get a memo to go out with the contract for all of you to take a look at. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. There's no discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Good evening, everybody.